Welcome back to the Shepherd's Pie, a slice of faith for our messy lives. I'm Tony Kolenc, a professor at Ave Maria School of Law, the father of 5 grown children, and the author of inspirational fiction for teens and adults. I'm really excited. Beginning of May, I'll be in Pittsburgh, actually, at the Diocese of Pittsburgh at the Catholic Literary Festival that they have there, speaking to hundreds of students from Catholic schools about my 2 sets of teen fiction. I've got my Harwood Mysteries for the older teens and Penny and the Stolen Chalice for the younger ones. So really excited about that. You can find more about those books on my website. But today I will be speaking with DeSantis about the virtue of affability and how we can harness it for evangelization. My guest today is Dr. Ann DeSantis, the Executive Director of the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. She's the author of a new book called The Virtue of Affability, or Friendliness, and its Relevance in Modern Evangelization. She is actually a speaker with Catholic Speakers Organizations, speaks all over the country, and of course, she's also a wife, a mother, and a grandmother and a Catholic. And we've had her on the show before, so it's really exciting to have you back again. Welcome back, Ann.
Tony, thank you so much for having me again on your podcast. I always like to be here with you discussing topics.
Yeah, and we have an interesting topic today, this idea of friendship or affability and evangelization. But before we get into that a little bit, for those of you who might not have remembered, Ann, tell us a little bit more about your background. What do you do at this foundation? Just a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much. My primary vocation in terms of my employment is that I am the executive director for the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith at nonnatus.org. We were founded by a religious order, which is the Mercedarian Religious Order, in 2015. We make pastoral outreach, free pastoral care for families in crisis, those families and individuals who are going through all kinds of adversities, traumas, and challenges. And so my role as executive director really is, it's a multifold position that I do all kinds of things, but I do get to interact with a lot of people who are going through hard times, who are in need of the church's pastoral care. And that's what we try to do. We try to meet them where they are and try to help them to get back on their feet and to feel that they are being looked upon with love by the church.
Now, this topic that we're going to be talking about today in the book that you wrote, is there an overlap between kind of what you're writing about and your life there as an executive director?
100%. Yes. I would say that over the 8 years almost that I've been working in this nonprofit, speaking with people from all over the United States and beyond on a daily basis, is that I have learned so much about the trials and tribulations that a lot of people go through. It could be something to do with a relationship crisis. It could be a divorce, a separation, job loss, trauma, loss of a loved one, health crisis. So yes, I would say that my work has led me to want to write this dissertation. I did just get my doctorate, my THD from Pontifex University, and this book was my dissertation, my project. And so it did lead me to a lot of research and also a lot of thought and prayer to be able to bring this topic to life so that people out there who are listening to this podcast and the world can learn about what this virtue is and what it can do to help us to grow as Catholic Christians.
So it's an interesting thing to write a dissertation about. So maybe before we dive into the topic, what brought your attention out of all the things you could do a dissertation on to pick that particular topic?
I think what drew me to it was some interaction years ago on social media that I would be hearing these words from educated people, educated Catholics, communicating the fact that the truth is the most important thing in terms of evangelization. That is a true fact, really, the truths of our faith. But then I was also hearing that being nice is really a side note. Jesus wasn't necessarily nice. He was good. He was our savior. He is our savior. He lived his life to bring about salvation for all of us through the Paschal mystery, right? The life, death, resurrection, and ascension of himself. But that being nice wasn't necessarily part of the equation for him. There's two different things here, two different aspects. We have kindness, which someone can be kind to someone, do a kind act, but it doesn't necessarily encompass demeanor, because I can be kind to you or to anyone, but I can do a kind act as an anonymous person. So affability is something much different. It does encompass kindness, because in reality, we can't be affable or friendly without having some aspect of kindness in us. But affability is really the demeanor. It is the way that we communicate. It is our smile. It is the way that we show that we genuinely care about another person. And that does encompass a little bit of niceness and friendliness. My idea with this dissertation is that in our modern evangelization, that we need that. We need to be more open and more willing to listen. Active listening is the ability to listen to another person and not necessarily agree with what they're saying. You can completely disagree politically, morally, whatever it is. But if we're willing to sit down with someone, listen, and still have a friendly demeanor to that person, and I don't mean in a false way, I mean open. In my dissertation, I learned that some of our Catholic saints and the teachings of our church are really in line with that. There's nothing that's against our faith in being that warm and open person.
So that's pretty neat. So you've already explained a little bit about affability. Is it related to one of the virtues? Is it just basically a synonym for friendly? You're putting it out there almost like it's a virtue, the virtue of affability. But is that what it is?
St. Thomas Aquinas wrote about this in the Summa Theologica. Affability is under the umbrella of justice. So it might not be one of those major virtues in terms of the ones that we're all familiar with, but it's under that umbrella of a part of moral justice in our offerings and our dealings with other people, the way that we show accompaniment to other people. Pope Francis talks a lot about that. He's on the cover of this book, a picture of him in a crowd. He spoke so much about what it means to be a missionary disciple. Each pope has his own charism. One of his greatest charisms was that of the poor. And in injustice, part of the justice that we give to other people is to give to the poor. And the poor are not always people who we would realize in our lives. We think of the homeless, we think of the sick, someone in a nursing home. But the justice that we give to other people, that moral justice, is really what we give to everybody. Affability is something that we should be aware of every day of our lives. Mother Teresa often spoke about our smile. The smile is that open door. We can be kind to someone, but we don't necessarily have to be affable, because you can do a kind act without even ever meeting someone. So they might not ever know what your demeanor is. So it is something different, but it's something that we should be aware of. And I think serious Catholics sometimes like to just put it in the trash can and say, it's not important. Being nice really doesn't matter, because we should focus on the truth of our faith. Well, there's three things here. There's truth, beauty, and goodness. And I think that affability really, I think it falls under goodness.
Yeah, very neat. So you did a dissertation on this. What's kind of the thesis of your book here?
The thesis of my book is that there is a certain relevance here, is that this virtue of friendliness and affability will help in our modern evangelization. As you and I both know, Tony, right now we're in a society where we've lost that. We have lost the ability to be polite, a good listener, to be able to be open to someone that we can disagree with, even somebody that we disagree with. It is so important for us not to lose that ability to be pastorally available to people, even those who might not want our help. Listening is one of the greatest gifts and something that we need to develop. It doesn't come naturally to so many people. And I do talk about this in the book. We all have a different personality. We have a different family of origin and background and experiences. So some people who might naturally not be outgoing, for instance, might find it hard to be affable and friendly when they would just feel more comfortable to be the receiver and not the giver.
So let's assume for the moment that being affable and friendly is going to help in evangelization. But as you point out, not all of us are affable and friendly by nature. Some of us kind of look grumpy, some of us act grumpy. What do people do? How do you develop being more affable if it doesn't come naturally?
Well, we have our faith, and prayer is our communication with the Lord. It's the way that we not only tell Him what's on our hearts, but we have to be open to what He's speaking, how He's speaking to us. And I really mean this. Through prayer, we can learn in our relationship with God how to imitate Him. His son Jesus was an affable person. He was open to the marginalized. You know that I wrote a first book called Love and Care for the Marginalized. And this dissertation is an extension of that idea that I had back in 2021. How can we reach the marginalized? It is such an important aspect of our faith. In Matthew 25, where Jesus spells it out, he separates the sheep from the goats. How did we respond to those who are hungry, thirsty, those who do not have shelter, those who are in prison? Not everybody who's in prison is someone who's in the prison system. It could be your next door neighbor that's a shut in. It could be your relative that nobody else talks to because they're having some kind of big family argument. Maybe it's that cousin or that aunt or uncle that nobody wants to talk to anymore. That person's in prison. It's a very simple concept that we as Catholics, we sometimes get caught in the minutia. We want to be educated people. We want to know our Bible. We want the truth. But yet this part of the truth is something that not all of us want to accept.
So for those people who talk about Jesus and they point out, hey, did you see how he dealt with the Pharisees? You know, he wasn't very affable to them. And there were times he's throwing over tables with the money lenders. He wasn't affable then. So kind of what is your pitch on Jesus being an affable, kind of friendly guy?
Wow, it's so funny because I actually do address that. I do have a chapter where I talk about the fact that yes, Jesus did have times of anger, but just because he had times of anger doesn't mean he wasn't open to others. Because remember, being open, friendly, and affable doesn't mean that we also have times that we do feel a sense of justified anger. Now, there's the key there, isn't it? Justified anger is much different than someone who just flies off the handle at something. That all had to do with justice, why he turned over those tables in the temple, right? It didn't just have to do with his feelings of, just explosiveness and wanting to just let out that anger. It was much different than that. There was a reason for it, but it does not mean or indicate that he was not an open person, especially to the poor and marginalized. And we are to do the same. And that is really the lesson in this book. I do talk about not only the teachings of our Holy Father in the book, but also of other popes, other modern popes, saints, just other lessons within our Catholic faith of why this is something that we really need to learn about and exercise. It's going to go nowhere unless people learn about it. I think it's kind of sad that St. Thomas Aquinas included it in his Summa Theologica. It was important enough for him to mention it and for other saints to discuss, and that most people, a lot of well-schooled people in our faith, still don't understand what it means. That says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I'm curious now because I know you did a lot of research for this, and I'm sure you delved into a lot of the saints. Was there any one particular discussion or saint that really stood out to you, or that surprised you, or that really impacted you?
St. Teresa of Calcutta. She talks so much about it, about the marginalized and how the people that are forgotten in our lives, they're always much closer than we realize. She talked about our Calcutta is much closer. We don't need to go to Calcutta or even sometimes even into the inner cities. In our own communities, it could be your own child or your spouse that we need to be more affable and open with. Another one is a saint that's going to be canonized in July, Pier Giorgio Frassati, who died at the age of 24. he was a young saint that devoted his life to caring for those who were poor. And he even died bringing medicine. He got sick because he was bringing medicine to an elderly woman who was destitute. And he himself contracted an illness and died. And at his funeral, thousands and thousands of people showed up. He was Italian. And in examining his life, they found out that this is what his life was all about. And he really was an affable person. I would say that for anybody who is listening to this podcast, he's someone to really learn about and read about. Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. But yes, there's so many saints that exercise that, and in my book, I believe I talk about at least 6 to 8 different saints and examining their lives and how their lives have demonstrated this valuable virtue.
All right, so spell this out for me a little bit then. If we are more affable or friendly and we make that part of how we relate to people, we are going to have a bigger impact evangelizing. So maybe lay that out for us a little bit. Why is that so, or how is that so?
When you look at not just the tenets of our faith, but we have to also take into consideration human development and psychology. What is one of the first signs when we have a baby of whether that baby is able to really communicate is that we look for that smile, right? And that first sign of the smile and the laugh. And we have to look at the fact that the neuroscience of emotion, that this whole aspect of research that has been done on people and on how we can thrive. We have to look at the whole person when it comes to evangelization. We don't just want to have a list of people that we want to get back to the Catholic Church. And once they go back to confession or come back to the sacraments, that there's a check mark on a page and we say, okay, that person's back, that person's back. No, it doesn't happen always that way. It's a process. And part of that process is that we have to have some kind of a relationship with someone. When we're able to be open and affable with a person, able to listen to their stories, able to accept them where they are in their lives at that moment, not so much sin, right? Because we never want to, as Catholics, we don't accept the sin, but we accept the person. And we accept the stories that they're telling us without judgment. We listen to those stories. We don't correct them along the way and say, no, you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done this, because we want to give them a chance to tell the whole story. And once we do that, through our kindness, through our affability, through our openness, we can show them the right way. But it takes time. It's not something that's done overnight. And I think as Catholics, we just need to accept the fact that love does encompass accompaniment. And actually, affability really is love. I'm not talking about the type of niceness that, and I mentioned this a little earlier in the podcast, it's a genuine niceness or kindness. It's not one that stabs someone in the back. You're nice to them, but really you're gossiping behind their back or cheating them or something. I'm talking about genuine, real, true friendship and affability.
So do you have, you probably have come across some examples or maybe spun out some hypotheticals in your book on this. Could you give us some examples of how this actually plays out in real life and how it actually does or has in individual lives actually made the difference in them turning to God, coming back to the faith, or something along those lines?
I've seen it in my family. I could say that I prayed relentlessly for a couple people that were away from their faith, and it was difficult at times. There were conversations that were very hurtful that I had to bear listening to and pray about and get consult from priests. And I've been to confession about certain things with, some of the bad conversations that we had. But it was all part of the process of growth. And those two people that I know are back to the faith and the sacraments. They say to me all the time that they're thankful to me for my prayers. And if you were to watch a movie of this whole thing, you'd probably be like, wow, that was a process, wasn't it? And I think for all of us, we know people in our families that we almost gave up. We were just like, wow, I just can't do this anymore. But we keep the door open. That's what affability is. It's keeping the door open, right? It's not shutting the door on someone. Now, we do have to have healthy boundaries. And I talked about that in my book because Healthy boundaries are sometimes people have addictions, or sometimes people have narcissistic personality. And that's tough. And I have dealt with that before, and dealing with people who have that. And it's hard. And being affable to them doesn't mean that we're giving a green light to their lifestyle or to some of their comments or behaviors or conversations. What it means is that we are imitating Christ in our ability to do prayer and sacrifice for them, and letting them know that, we're here, but also at the same time, we are hoping for some change in their lives. We accept them as a human being, but we're not going to always accept the behavior or the sin.
Yes, that's a really tough one, I think, because I hear what you're saying. I mean, you have to keep communications open. I know, like, Pope Francis gets criticized a lot about some of the things he says and how they could be interpreted by different communities. But I think he's trying to keep lines of communication open to different communities. So that's part of this affability, I think, that you're talking about. But at the same time, people worry. I don't want to, let's say whatever, they have a child who is doing something they don't approve of. How do I keep open those lines of communication, but not at the same time give the impression that I am now accepting things that I'm not? I mean, I think people worry about this because we also don't want to cause scandal. We don't want to give false impressions about what is, right. Any advice for people kind of struggling with those kinds of issues?
Well, I would say take it to prayer always, because when we pray, either before the Blessed Sacrament or just in your daily prayer life, in your quiet time, just ask for God's grace during challenging times. As Christians, it's part of the cross, isn't it? Part of the cross of our lives, and it's Lent. And it's that time of rediscovery of our faith, a rediscovery of our real relationship with Christ, not just something that we mechanically do. I think as Catholics, we can get caught up into that, can't we? This virtue of affability and friendliness, it's not something mechanical at all. It really is something that's got to be authentic. And so people who are struggling with that whole idea of my child is in sin, or my parent, or whoever it is, your friend, just remember, sin affects every single one of us, not just one of us. We're not there yet. So if we're religious people and we feel like we're doing all these things every day, we go to daily mass, we do all the right things, we give to the church, we're doing as much. But remember, we're still affected by sin. So even though we might be looking at this other person and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're so far away from their faith and it's terrible. Well, we're in that same boat together, because we're all, even there's different levels, right? I mean, we have mortal sin, we have serious sin, we have venial sin, but it doesn't matter. Sin affects all of us. So look at it that way. Thank God in advance. I always say, when you pray, don't look for results. Okay. That's hard, isn't it? I think we're in this society, right? When I go to school, I'm expecting to get an A or a B in a class. When I did that dissertation, I had to get in front of a bunch of people and defend myself. I wanted to pass, right? But the way that it is in a relationship with God, when we meet Jesus at the end of our lives, he's not going to stand there with a pen and paper in hand with a checklist. It's going to be an encounter. How well did we love him and other people? Now, of course, it encompasses all of church teaching. We know that. But that's what it comes down to. God knows our hearts. That's what this is all about. Okay. It's going to be an encounter. So when we pray for people that we're concerned about, just remember, thank God in advance. It's all going to be fine. Don't pray for a result. You just be Christ to other people and do your best. We might not see results by the end of our lives. It's not the way it works. It's not a board game, right? Or a report card. Our relationship with Christ is the most real thing we will ever feel or encounter in our lives.
That's, I think, a beautiful way to summarize this. So if folks are interested in your book, where do you want them to go to get it?
Yeah, well, there's a couple places. They could just look up online, En Route Publishing, ENROUTE Publishing, or you can just go to my website. It's andesantis.com. And if you just go there, or you can just go on Amazon, and if you key in Dr. Ann DeSantis, you're going to see that book pop up.
Wonderful. All right. Any parting thoughts then for us as we wind up here?
Well, I want to thank you. You're doing great work. Please, for people who are listening to this podcast that are friends of mine, I would ask you to subscribe to the Shepherd's Pie podcast and look up Tony Kolenc, Antony Kolenc on Amazon, or go to his website because he's doing amazing work. He's going to be a guest on my show, Journeys in Faith with DeSantis on YouTube. Also, just about me, I'm a Catholic speaker with Catholic Speakers Organization. I am scheduling events both in Pennsylvania, where I live, in the Philadelphia area and beyond. Right now, I have about 6 or 7 speaking events in the United States, which I'm going to be discussing not only this book, but just topics related to it. Just go to Catholic Speakers Organization and look up my name.
Well, it's been wonderful having you on the show, and thank you for that little plug. That's very kind of
Oh,
you.
absolutely.
So it's been great having you back.
Thank you, Tony.
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for the show today. We've been speaking again with Dr. Ann DeSantis about affability and how it can help us evangelize those in our life. Again, this is Antony Barone Kolenc. If you want me to come speak to your school or a homeschool group, and you can find all that stuff out on my website, antonykolenc.com. But until next time, may God bless us as we rely on our faith to work through the messy challenges in our lives.